Hello everybody, welcome back to High Ground. My name is Tanner, and today we're going to be going over the results, the games, the stats, all this stuff from the first week of NAL 2023 stage number 1. So 14 games to cover, so I'm going to try to go through things quickly, but this could end up being quite a lengthy video. We'll have to see. I mean, you can obviously see how long it is already, but I don't know how long it'll be. Oxygen versus Beast Coast for the first game of the stage. Oxygen takes it pretty handily, as is the case with the first 3 games that we're going to see. They were all pretty expected results. Beast Coast with an okay performance in some regards. They would certainly ramp it up in the next 2 games, but Oxygen coming out of the gates hot. As most people anticipated, there was a possibility they would slump after their good performance at SI, as a lot of teams have done before. That sort of happened to TSM and the Sonics last year. They were the top 2 performing NA teams at SI, and then they fell off hard afterwards. But I guess not the case with Oxygen, at least not yet, because they are, if you don't know, the number 1 team in the league at the moment. Do keep in mind, some teams have played 4 games, and some teams have played 3 games. Four teams have played 4, and 4 have played 3, so things are a little bit different there. Some teams haven't played as many as the others. Dream went nuclear in this game. No entry engagements at all, but he went 14 and 4, 100% cost, 60% survival, still getting 5 plants. Like, insane game from Dream. And then on the other hand, Hyper, Hat, MrB, kind of okay games. Vertical, and especially Doc, 1 and 8, pretty unfortunate. Newer's having sort of an uncharacteristically bad game. And we'll go on to the next one. We have M80 versus Parabellum, the debut of Iconic and Spoit on M80, and it was a pretty good showing. Maybe not the highest caliber of team to go against in your first game, as this is, this Parabellum roster's first game, with Fish and Spiker even making their T1 debut, Spiff making his NAL debut. But, still a good showing from M80, I'd say, on Oregon. Diaz, Iconic, Spoit all popping off, and then Gomez and Kino doing okay. On Parabellum, nobody doing especially well. Sky's doing especially bad, but he is sort of their hard support player, so it makes sense for him to be on the bottom of the board. Next game up, we have Dark Zero versus Mirage, and this was, I think, the most decisive game we've had this stage. Dark Zero gets 7-2'd by Oxygen, unless it's a 7-3, but we'll get there. I can't remember off the top of my head which one it is. So we haven't seen any 7-1s or 7-0s, I believe. I hope I'm not misremembering that. So pretty competitive stage thus far, and pretty unfortunate showing from Mirage in their first game. Maybe it was because they just weren't ready for Skyscraper, and maybe it was because all the Dark Zero players were popping up, except for Achieved. He's had a really rough stage thus far. NJR is the highest rated player, and Achieved is the lowest rated player at this moment in time. Almost double the rating on NJR. So brutal for Achieved thus far, but his team's still doing, not bad. Not bad up to this point. Panba, NJR, Giveni, even Canadian, all doing quite well here. And then on the other hand, Rampy and DP Fire doing fine, but Surf and Kansan and especially Yeti, 1 and 9 0.2 rating, pretty brutal game for them. The roles are a bit curious here. So Canadian, you don't see it in this game, but his main operator is now has been Thermite. They had Pambazoo on the Habana, so maybe it's just map dependent, but over the course of the games that they played thus far, yeah, Canadian has played the most. His main operator has been Thermite. So I think Pamba and NJR and maybe even Achieved have played a little bit of hard breach, but yeah, Canadian seems to be that main breach player, which a lot of people were anticipating and hoping for based on who is now on the team. And then on Mirage, they opted to go with Surf. So I just sort of didn't even consider this as a possibility. It makes sense. Surf's played this in the past. He played a little bit of this on Beast Coast, but he was really thriving in other roles besides this. Maybe that's just because everyone else on that roster is bad. I don't know. But I really expected it to be DP Fire or maybe Yeti or Kansan on the hard breach, but they opted for Surf. Maybe if Mirage continues to not do so well, they'll take him off it and switch roles around. But it's still pretty early to tell. Still a fresh team. Don't give them too much. Give them a little bit of credit. Don't be too harsh on them just yet. Same thing with Beast Coast and Parabellum. Even though Beast Coast has done pretty well thus far, but we'll get to the overall stuff in a little bit. Next game we have Sonics versus Space Station, the first of 3 consecutive around 15 games for Space Station, and a really tight game. Sonics, they just couldn't get across the line. They've not had a great stage thus far. There is time for them to bounce back. 4 more games for them to go, but not great starting off with a loss when Sonics just look like such an amazing team on paper. They had a poor SI performance, so Citizen really hasn't proven his stuff just yet. And the new Space Station roster looked really solid, but it seemed like maybe they'd need a little bit more time to gel with, Merck's played with Fultz in the past. Fultz and Houghton have been playing together for a while now. Forrest and Jane, I know the same sort of thing. And I guess it all came together fairly quickly. And in this game, it was Grixer with 18 kills. That might be the highest kill game that we've seen thus far. I don't remember 100%, but nobody else doing especially well. Citizen doing okay, I guess, and then the rest of them not doing too well. But on the other hand, Space Station, J9O, and Fultz popping off, and then Forest, Merc, and even Hot and Cold all doing fine. Not the best kill death scoreline by Hot and Cold, but keep in mind he's now sort of playing their hard support. He had 4 plants, so good on him there. Next game, we have Dark Zero versus M80, 8-7 victory. And I think a lot of people were anticipating Dark Zero to be getting left behind a little bit this stage with how scary the Sonics roster, the M80 roster, the Oxygen roster, and even the who am I forgetting? What game were we just at? And this, I don't know, the Space Station roster, I don't know, I just blanked on that. All of them looking really scary, and then even the other 3 teams seeming to have some potential. Dark Zero, Canadian achieve both world champions. NJR is really, really good, obviously. He just continues to prove himself. And then Pamba's also been a very solid player, and Gaveni hasn't yet proven himself, but I think a pretty anticipated player. So all of this to say that I predicted MA to win this game, and they were 1 round away from doing so. And is this and honestly they should have won because they let NJR 1v4 clutch them, and that was even in regulation, so they would have, had that not happened and everything else with the same, M80 should have won 7-5, but anyways, Dark Zero walks away with the win. Kino kind of popping off here, 3 plants, 13 and 10, Diaz and Spoit doing well as well, Iconic doing fine, Gomez really being the weak link in this particular game, but Achieved and Pamazoo also not doing too well. It was NJR and Gaveni that really got Dark Zero across the line, particularly NJR with that big clutch. Next game, Space Station versus Mirage, and yes, another round 15 game. Mirage super choke here. They were up like 6-3, and then they let Space Station come back 8-7. Similar to what happened last stage with the other Mirage. They were up like 6-1 or something, and then they lost like 8-6 against Space Station, whatever it was on Chalet. Pretty much different teams, Hot and Cold and Fultz still around, but I guess all the other players different, and well, Yeti and Rampy were actually on Space Station at the time, but 5 different players on Mirage than were on last stage. Anyways, heartbreaker for Mirage. They could have had their first win, but alas, they continue to be winless, but I suppose this does at least get them a point on the board. Fultz popping off here, Merc doing well as well, J9O same thing, Hot and Cold and Force a little bit lower down, but they did get the win. Yeti, Rampy, Kansan, all pretty impressive games coming out, really high kill totals. Surf and DP Fire sort of struggling, but those are their two of their more support-oriented players. I'm not 100% sure what their exact structures meant to be at the moment. Obviously, Surf is on the hard support, playing these ops, but I haven't watched them closely enough. I guess Yeti Rampy on entry and DP Fire. I think a lot of people were saying if he wasn't going to be on hard support that they'd like to see him back on entry, but he's playing more of like Slet. I don't know. We'll have to see what their deal is going forward. Maybe it's actually been revealed more than I've let on, but maybe just the Mirage games I haven't watched super intently to see what happens, because this is a little bit, like everyone has 2 to 4 entry engagements. So what are you gonna do? Anyways, we'll move on. Going to Oxygen versus Parabellum, and this was the biggest upset of the stage up to this point. Parabellum, I didn't think anybody thought that they were going to beat Oxygen, especially after Oxygen came out of the gates hot and got the win. Maybe if they were shakier against Beast Coast, this would make more sense, but I think at this point it is just a bit of an oddity. And well, we're playing best of ones, we're playing online, anything can happen. Like it's so hard to predict these things when you're not playing best of threes. Things are just not consistent. It's so hard to win every game when you are playing just best of ones, because anyone can take a map off anyone at this level of play with all these caliber of players. But no, yeah, they do walk away with the win. Dream definitely falling off from its first game. Nobody doing super well on Oxygen, and same sort of thing I guess on Parabellum. Similar ratings, slightly higher though on Parabellum. Skies beating out Foxy a little bit, Fish beating out Dream a little bit, and it was a close game, so close stat lines make sense here. Moving on to Sonics versus Beast Coast. This was I think it's the first game of the second day, right? Yeah, the 16th, 2 p.m. And this was another big shock. Sonics should not have lost this game. They went up 4-2 after their attacking half, and it should have been a 5-1 probably, because they let MrB like 1v3 clutch or something. They let him get a nice clutch. Clutches happen sometimes, and still after getting a 4-2 attacking half on Cafe, you should be able to convert that, I would think. But Sonics were so awful on defense. Beast Coast wasn't even that good. Like, I don't know, I guess they just played better than Sonics. Sonics played worse than Beast Coast, whatever the case. Sort of an embarrassing loss, and not a mark against these players. Obviously, they have some good players, and they just haven't been a team that long, and just overall, these kind of look like the better players than these players, but not in this particular game. Beast Coast walks away with the win. Yeah, nobody doing that well. Grixer, really uncharacteristically bad. Geo has a lot of games stat-wise, but when you have super killers on your team and you're the hard support, what are you going to do? That's sort of expected. MrB really popping off here, and then Hyper, Hat, Doc doing fine. Vertical, not amazing, but, you know, okay. He started this game like 0-4 or something, so 6-7 is a pretty nice scoreline to salvage from that. And yeah, I think MrB is sort of the star of the show. You'll notice when we look at the stats at the end, MrB and Hat, the two highest rated players on this team by a pretty significant margin, and they are actually the two rookies on this team. Hyper and Vertical, long-standing vets, and then Doc has played a little bit in T1. Moving on, we have M80 versus Mirage, 7-3 victory. So, you know, maybe you thought this would have been closer based on the fact that Mirage almost beat Space Station, but no, they have another pretty heavy defeat. They got 7-2'd by Dark Zero, 7-3'd by M80. So certainly still things to figure out. I mean, honestly, they have four more. Yeah, they only play 3, so they have 4 more games to play, but it's just in such a short time span. Like the stage, this portion of the stage is so small, only 2 weeks with 2 Playdays in each week. It's just not a lot of time to figure it out. I don't have the highest expectations for Mirage. I think if they keep the roster, they'll have potential in the future, but and even if they don't make it to even if they don't make top 6 in this part and advance to the next part, there's still like the open quals, I believe, that they can go through. And so their chances aren't over, but for the stage, it's looking a little bit dangerous for them. Yeah, Diaz and Kino popping off here. Gomez, Iconic, Spoit doing okay. Iconic and Spoit, you'll see it in the stats. They've been like okay, like they're around a 1.0 rating, but I think a lot of people expected a lot more. These are really hot pickups coming on this roster, and they've just not been amazing. I guess M80's done fine enough thus far, but I don't know, just seemed like they could have been better. I think Diaz and Kino have sort of continued to be the most impressive players, but those are sort of your support players, so you might expect a little bit more out of your frontline players. And Gomez actually hasn't been very good. He was fine in this game, but we'll see the stats. Kansan popping off here, and DP Fire doing okay. Surf, Rampy, Yeti all getting kind of smashed, so I think not a lot to look at there. We'll go to the next. We have Sonics versus Parabellum. Finally, Sonic stabilizing a little bit. Parabellum, you know, maybe it wouldn't have been totally unreasonable to predict them here. Sonics was 0-2 up to this point. Parabellum was, were they 1? No, they were 1-0. They hadn't lost. They only played Oxygen and they beat them. They played, yeah, their other games against Space Station. No, wait, did they? I'm totally forget. I don't know. There's too many games to think about. Did they already play twice? I don't know. They played. Yeah, they lost their first game, and then they beat Oxygen, and then they lost this one. So they were 1-1. Sonics were 0-2. They took down Oxygen, so there were reasons to believe Parabellum could have won, but Sonics seemed to adjust and figure things out a little bit more, going to Clubhouse, which is generally a pretty solid map for Sonics, but also a map that newer teams can excel on based on it's just a map everybody knows pretty well. Looking at the stats, Grixer, another pop-off game. Gunner, Geo doing well as well. Citizen and Rexton, a little bit lackluster, but it was a decisive win. Can't complain too much. Laxing and Spiff doing fine. Fish and Spike are a little bit worse, and Skies are really struggling, unfortunately, on the Clubhouse. And moving on, we have M80 versus Oxygen, and this looked like on paper one of the more exciting games of the stage, and I'd say it more or less delivered. Didn't go overtime, but still max regulation. It did feel like Oxygen maybe it wasn't in total control, but it didn't feel like it ever really slipped away. Like it was pretty even, or Oxygen was ahead for the most part. And so yeah, a good game coming out from Gomez. I think this is probably his best game of the stage thus far, and you know, pretty good game. Have a good game in, but well, actually no, because they lost. I forgot for a second. They did lose, so maybe not the best game. I guess maybe if he had a little bit more backup from Spoit and Iconic, they could have got it across the line, but no. Oxygen pretty good on border. You know, they 7-0 W7M on it at SI, and this is also just not even the first time they played it this stage thus far. So Yaga and Newers really nice scoreline. Sweater and Foxay struggling, but you know, Yaga and Newers were enough to get the victory. So we have Space Station versus Beast Coast. Third round 15 game in a row for Space Station, but they could not pull this one out. Beast Coast is actually 2-1. Pretty nice start for them, man. Space Station, they're second place in the league. Had they won this in round 15, they'd be tied first place with Oxygen on points, but still can't complain too much about second place. Do keep in mind they're one of the teams that has played 4 games rather than 3, so there's still a little bit of potential for other teams to sort of catch up or pass them, but still 8 points out of the possible 12 points is pretty good. J9O, another excellent game. Hot and Cold, a good game. Fultz, Forrest, Merc, especially Merc, I guess, lackluster here. His entry stats were fine, but a few more kills out of him and maybe Forrest, and, you know, maybe you would have won in overtime or even regulation. Hat, 15 kills, pretty nice. MrB doing well, Doc. And then Vert and Hyper, the two vets and two of the fraggers sort of struggling here. But the younger players are really getting it done for Beast Coast, which you sort of love to see. I mean, maybe it's tough to see some of the old high tier players not doing so well, but maybe they'll have their bounce back moment and they're in a decent position to you know, to place well going forward. And then we have Dark Zero versus Oxygen winding down. This is the other 7-2 that we've had so far. So Dark Zero got a 7-2 and they got a 2-7. So Oxygen a tiny bit shaky in that they took the loss to Parabellum, but their other 3 games they did win in regulation thus far. So you know, they're looking quite good. They're top of the league after all on 9 points, undisputed. But again, played you know, 4 games rather than the 3 of some other teams. So on the stats, you know, NJR doing fine, but everybody else kind of struggling. And then Newers finally seems to be fully back. He was not doing so well, and he ramping up, and now with 13-5 destruction of Dark Zero. Good to see if you're a Newers fan or an Oxygen fan. Foxday doing well, Yaga, Dream, even Sweater doing okay. You know, 6-6 is fine. Nobody going negative here on Oxygen, except for Sweater's entry. And then we have Space Station versus Parabellum. I think this is the last game, right? So Parabellum go down to 1-3. Unfortunate. This is a team I would have liked to have seen do well, but it would have, you know, they were a bit of a dark horse certainly. And I do enjoy seeing Space Station do well, as you may well know. So a quick look at the stats. Everybody kind of popping up, except for Merc. He's had a few bad games. We'll see his stats overall. They're not dreadful, but I think he's certainly been playing his role. Maybe he just needs to tighten up just a little bit. He's a little bit the odd man out in that we have 2 former Space Station players, 2 former Stralis players, and then he's coming over from TSM. So maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe not. Hard to completely say. Skies with a really excellent game. Not enough to push overtime or anything like that, but as the Breach player, it's nice to see 11 kills sort of popping off, and then Spiker, Spiff struggling a bit. Okay, that does it for the game. So we will look at the stats overall, and then we'll look at the standings. So I want to mostly look at it in the context of the teams, but we'll see this really quickly. NJR, the best player in the league by far, the highest KPR by quite a lot. Only 2 players have 2 1vx's, Grixer and Newers, 2 of the, you know, best players in the world, to be quite frank. Looking at entry, Yog has been good here, but a lot of the main entry players aren't even up here. Like, these aren't, I guess Fish is, but like Yaga and JR, MrB, like these aren't your entry players, right? You have to go to like Rexen, he's doing fine. Like Citizen, Spoit, yeah. So a lot of the entry players getting into a lot of entry engagements, but not necessarily going super positive. Merc, 13-13. He has by far the most. Spoit has 19, and that's the second most. Merc has 26. Do keep in mind, Space Station has played 56 rounds in 4 games, so they've had more opportunities to get entry kills and every other stat line, but still 26 is a lot. And if we go all the way down here, Spiker is 3-10 playing Ace and Smoke. He went 0-5 in 1 game on entry, so he was just, I think it was his first game, so he was really fumbling the bag there. I don't know why he's got into so many entry engagements, but maybe just don't do that, Spiker. Who knows? Yeah, pretty brutal there. So let's switch over to group players by team. You'll notice a lot of there's a pretty big gap on most teams between the top 1 or 2 players and the rest of the players. So you see it here, NJR way better than everyone else. Parabellum very tightly knit, all the players within 0.1 rating of one another. M80, Diaz, the highest rated player by a good bit, and then MrB and Hat, the 2 best players on Beast Coast by quite a lot. You know, over 0.2 rating between Hat and Hyper, so they've really been carrying them through their games, especially MrB. I mean, he's 1.17 rating. He's like is he top 5 rated? He's this, you know, well, tied for top 5, I guess, with Dream. But you know, it's nice seeing 2 hard support players. A little bit weird because this generally doesn't happen too much anymore. But yeah, MrB in his debut has been really good thus far. Really good. Let's put this back on rating. Okay. Yeah, so you notice that there, Grixer here, really big gap to Gunner, but then even a really big gap between Gunner and Citizen. Kansan and Rampy for Mirage. Everyone's pretty tightly knit on Oxygen from Dream to Foxay, a 0.1 difference, so that's nice to see, but Sweater is sort of the outlier. Sweater a bit on Fraud Watch, I guess. He was their worst performing player at SI, also their worst player in this stage thus far. Their hard support player is #1, and their Ashe Legion player is the worst, so I like to see him shore that up a bit. I guess that hasn't cost the team too much because they're #1 in the league, but You know, they probably are expecting a bit more from Sweater than -1. And then finally, J90 and Fultz are the two big performers for Space Station. And then one more thing I wanted to point out here with the stats. Space Station is terrible on the entry, apparently. They're -10 overall, and in the past, Space Station was generally a roster that was really good on the entry. It hasn't cost them too much because they're in second place with these terrible entry stats. Merc having an absolute ton going even, but everyone else going negative. A little bit weird. And then Dark Zero is actually the best in the league, but they're only +5, so these two cancel out, and then this is, yeah, +5, and everyone else is actually between +2 and -2, maybe even +2 and -1, because we have, I don't really want to read them all out, but like, for example, Parabellum is like -1, and M80 is +2, and I won't read all of them, but you know, just take my word for it. They're all plus or minus just 1 or 2. So it's a little bit weird to see. It's the performance of the teams, at least thus far, over the course of 3 or 4 games, how well they've done hasn't really been reflected by the entry, and that isn't always the case, but it just seems like it's all pretty random here because, you know, Dark Zero is one of the better teams, and they have the good entry, but Space Station one of the better teams with terrible entry, and so I think you get my meaning there. And finally, let us go over to the standings here. Okay, so I've alluded to them quite a lot, but here they are in reality. We have Oxygen, Space Station, M80, Dark Zero, Beast Coast, Sonics, Parabellum, and Mirage, and there's about 1 point separating a lot of these teams, like go down 1 point, 1 point, then 2 points, 0 points, 1 point, 1 point, 2 points, and so it's all fairly well decided at this point, halfway through the stage. Again, slightly over or slightly under halfway for any of these teams. Oxygen, Space Station, M80, and Parabellum have all played 4, and then Dark Zero, Beast Coast, Sonics, and Mirage all having played 3. So they have more bounce back potential than the other teams. Like if Dark Zero just wins 1 game, then they'll be up on 8 points, same as Space Station, above M80. M80 2-2. Maybe not as good as you would have hoped for them thus far. Again, Oxygen doing pretty well, Space Station doing pretty well, Beast Coast doing surprisingly well, and then probably as anticipated, Parabellum and Mirage, 2 of the lower performing teams. Mirage, I mean, if they could get all the way up to like 13 points, which might be enough. You only have to make top 6 to make it into the next stage. The bracket is right here. So if you get top 2, you get to get a bye basically, and if you make 3rd through 6th, you get to go into the the regular round. But the other 2 basically get eliminated. So you just want to make top 6, ideally top 2, but top 6 is fine enough. So Parabellum and Mirage most of all in the danger zone. With Parabellum all the way down here, and having played 4 games, they can only make their way up to 12 points, and 12 points is probably good enough, but it's going to be tough given that they've only gotten 3 thus far. So is there anything else I want to talk about here? I don't think so. Maybe some like tiny things with some of the teams, but I've probably alluded to as much as there is to allude to, because I've been talking for a long ass time. So all right, leave me a like, leave me a subscription, leave me a comment about any of this stuff, question, concern, whatever, request for any other type of video you might want to see. And with all that being said, catch you guys next time.